Good afternoon and welcome to the historic Southern University Law Center, one of the most effective, diverse, and community-centric law centers in the nation. I am Alfreda Tillman-Bester. I serve as special counsel for human services at Southern University Law Center's Vulnerable Communities and Peoples Initiative. This is our third in a series of 4 webinars designed to bring clarity to our community regarding the 2021 Louisiana legislative session and the extraordinary veto bust session, that followed. Southern University Law Center would like to thank our partners in this endeavor, Louisiana Progress, and the National Association of Social Workers Louisiana chapter. Today, we are discussing healthy families, women and children, education, healthcare, workers' rights, and more. But first, we would like to ask our wonderful, innovative, brilliant Chancellor, John Pierre, to come and welcome our guests and attendees to Southern University Law Center.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Bester. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Southern University Law Center's webinar series in conjunction with various partners that have been mentioned by Attorney Bester. We are very, very happy to be able to bring information to have you understand some of the things that are very, very important. And today we're going to be talking about healthy families, healthcare, health equity, a lot of things, education, workers' rights. They're all they're tied together, and they're important for our community to understand what's happening in the legislature. She has a great panel here, a lot of great experts and advocates who will be able to really give you great information and keep you in the know so that you can be aware of some of the big discussions that are happening in the legislature and the policies that are being developed and the laws that are being developed. I want to again thank you all for joining either as a participant or a panelist. Today is SU Give Day. It's a big day in the SU system. I won't be able to stay on long. I'm going to have to go and do what they asked me to do, which is help raise money. But today is a big day, and our goal is to raise $7 million today. So you can see I got a little work to do. But anyway, I want to thank you all for investing your time and helping us be the best law center community university that we can be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. I want to remind our audience that you are receiving continuing legal education credit today, as well as continuing education units for social workers. So we will let you know when it's time to put your identifying information to share that with us. But first, I would like to introduce our wonderful, outstanding panel for today. And I will start with introducing, I'm going to go through all of the introductions and then we'll come back and we'll start. I want to start with, let me just do this as a point of personal privilege, my personal senator, she belongs to me, Senator Regina Ashford Barrow, who is the Louisiana senator from District 15 here in Baton Rouge. She is the vice chair of the Health and Welfare Committee, and she serves on the Senate Finance, Judiciary C, Labor and Industrial Relations Committees, and she is the chair of the Senate Select Committee on Women and Children. I could go on, and I will go on and on because I want you to know also that she is on the Joint Medicaid Oversight Committee and the Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget. She does yeoman's work, y'all, and I'm not just being prejudiced with that because she's my senator. She does, and everyone knows that. I would also like to introduce Representative Tammy Phelps, who is the Louisiana State Representative from District 3. Representative Phelps sits on House Education and the House Labor Committee. My next guest is Miss Alma Stewart Allen, who is the founder and president of the Louisiana Center for Health Equity. She is a registered nurse, and she is an administrator, and she is a retired civil servant from the Louisiana Department of Health, but I was Health and Hospitals at that time. Miss Morgan Lemandre, who is an alum of the Southern University Law Center, right? And she is the legal director for Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response, which many of you will know as STAR. Miss Angelle Bradford, who is a member of the executive committee of the Sierra Club. She is a PhD student at Tulane in health, right? And she is the Louisiana chapter leader for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Next, we have Miss RuthAnne Oakey-Forest. I'm sorry, I messed it up because we've been reading it wrong. Miss RuthAnne Oakey-Frost. I did it again, Frost, who is policy director for the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children. And finally, we have Miss Latanya Howard, who is a member of StepUp Louisiana, and she works with workers' rights. First of all, I would just welcome all of you to Southern University Law Center, and we're looking forward to a wonderful webinar today. I would like to start, Senator, with Senator Regina Ashford Barrow, and we're going to talk about the legislative session. We're going to talk about the challenges that presented themselves during the session. We're going to talk about the things that went well, and we're going to talk about the things where we need to pick up next year and fight even harder. So Senator Barrow, welcome to Southern University Law Center. You're on mute, Senator.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to my constituent and my friend, Alfreda Basta-Tillman, for inviting me to participate in this great forum. I am so happy to share this platform with so many experts. And I want to say that I'm glad to be a part of this. And I want to thank Southern University Law Center, the Department of Children and Family Services, and all the partners who put together this update from the 2021 legislative session. And I can tell you that certainly COVID-19 presented a lot of issues as it related to us being able to facilitate a lot of our work and individuals being able to participate in the process. That's one of the things that I saw as somewhat of a hindrance, because people were uncomfortable in many situations where they didn't feel comfortable in coming to the legislature. And to some degree, their voices may have not been heard. Many individuals did, do letters and they sent those in, but it's not the same as being in person. And I do believe that has some bearings on the legislative process. But at the end of the day, we were able to accomplish some substantial things. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about the legislation that I worked on, that I was very happy with my colleagues to get through the process regarding pregnant women and the accommodations to be made during the workplace. And I think I have another place in this platform to talk about that, as well as power-based violence that we were able to pass, and legislation for children in the foster care system, where they actually now have a Bill of Rights. So those were some things that passed that were good. We were able to give teachers pay raises, which is significant, because when you start talking about families and you're talking about communities, teachers make up a great part of our communities and families, and certainly ensuring that we gave them pay raises was, to me, significant, although it wasn't enough. But we did have a lot of challenges. And one of the things I want to say, just kind of going into this, and to all my male friends that are on the call, this is certainly no indictment to you. But what I would like to see going forward is more women elected to office. We need more women elected to the legislature, because when we look at a lot of the issues that are impacting family and children, the perspective that women bring to the table is quite different. And oftentimes it's not included in those conversations. And therefore we need more women. Now, one of the things I'm just kind of divert just a little bit to talk about, since we are given the latitude to talk about changes. I have been in the legislature for 16 years. I served 10 and a half years in the House, and this is my 6th year in the Senate. And one of the things that I have definitely recognized is the difference that term limits makes. You know, term limit to me is a double-edged sword. I believe term limits happen every time we run for office, because people do know how to unelect someone. But the value, the institutional knowledge that has been lost through the process is enormous. The respect for the process is one thing that I have seen more and more each year be diminished in the way that legislators, as well as, you know, the people, are treated oftentimes when they come to the people's house. It's not with the level of respect that it should be. And so going forward, that is something as it relates to decorum and how we should conduct ourselves as legislators is an issue that I would take up with leadership. But I have definitely seen that decline since I've been there. And I can tell you, when I first got to the legislature, I had my plans of what I wanted to see done. And I thought all my plans were correct. I thought that I had the remedy to fix every situation. And to some degree, I did. But you have to work with 143 other individuals to get those things passed through the process. And so, you know, for some of the new legislators that are there, I know they may come with that same level of passion and commitment, but they have to understand that they have to work with other legislators, and the people that you represent are not the same people that my colleagues may represent. So I represent a different population of people that have different priorities, and they represent a different set of people that have other priorities. And you have to learn to work together to be able to get things done. One of the things that continues to me to be such a glaring issue, and it's so disheartening, after all these years, over 100 years, the level of unfairness and inequity as it relates to the rate of pay for men and women doing the same work. We are still fighting that battle. When I got there 16 years ago, we were fighting that battle. And at the time, Representative Hunter brought the equal pay bill every year. Then he left, and then our governor, when he was in the legislature, played a role. And then when he became governor, we tried to retweak how we actually submitted that legislation. And it still to this day has not passed. And it is very unfair for women who are doing the same work to not be paid the same rate of pay. We even try pay secrecy, you know, so there's so many things that we are still fighting, which really contribute to the demise of our community, because when the family unit is not strong, and unfortunately in the state of Louisiana, more than 70% of our whole household are led by women. When the pay rate is not equitable, then it is hard for us to see the outcomes that we would like to see in our communities. And so when we talk about social determinants of health and all those things that contribute to who we are and things that are happening in our communities, the first thing that we need to address is the inequity in pay. And often with what we see today, laws that are in place, policies are in place, these things come as a result of legislative bodies, council bodies, or from the federal government. And we are living out what has been passed to us in terms of legislation. And a lot of times these legislative items are not fair and they're not equitable as it relates to the communities that we represent. And it does not give the fairness to families and communities that we need them to give. So when we're looking at, and I'm going to kind of go a little bit further off, just a little bit, if you will indulge me. about redistricting. When it comes down to that, which I understand that you guys will be doing that segment maybe next week or the following week, it's important that we look at seats where we can have people that represent the interests of this state and for the majority of the people that send them to the legislature. So when we begin to look at redistricting, we need to make sure that we're taking all those things into consideration, making sure that districts are not gerrymandered and things of that sort, where you're packing and cracking and so forth and so on, where you don't have fair representation. But at the end of the day, most of the people that we represent want the same thing, and that's fairness, equity, and the opportunity to be able to be their best. And we can only do that when we have good people elected to office. So I thank you
so
again,
much, Senator,
and for this opening.
Thank you so much, Senator. See, I told y'all, I know y'all passion. It starts to rise up, and it's kind of hard to stay in a certain period of time. I'm gonna do my best to keep you guys on track.
Thank you.
But I know you're gonna go over a little bit. That's okay. That's why we did an hour and a half. Thank you so much, Senator. Now I want to go to Representative Tammy Phelps, who is a member of both the House Education Committee and the House Labor Committee. Welcome, Representative Phelps. You made it to your destination.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope there's not too much of an echo here.
No, you're fine. Thank you so much.
Okay, just real briefly, because I know time is of an essence. Thank you to both of your organizations for inviting Senator Barrow and I to just give our view of what has gone on with the session, which has been very taxing, disappointing, and sometimes rewarding at the same time. And it would not be such a pleasure to serve if it was not serving for others whom we know that we can make a difference for. Real briefly on education, I just would like to start where Senator Barrow left off with our teacher pay, which again was not enough. And that's something that we definitely recognize, and hopefully we can make some progress before the end of this term. When you mentioned the term of good, bad, and the ugly, we know that was a term used in the Education Committee, which was very controversial because of the nature of what it was meant. So that brought us to, and if I would give the background story on that, as I recall, Representative Duplessis did bring some legislation forward asking for more African-American history to be taught in our schools. There was a consensus made that there will be a social studies review committee coming later this year. Let's try to address it that way instead of a bill at this time. Give them an opportunity to look at it and address some of our concerns. Not anything more, not anything less, because this country and our state, as it relates to Louisiana history, we would not be where we are if it was not for the contributions of other cultural backgrounds and including African Americans. So that brings me to where we are with the, I did attend the State Board of Education meeting last week. There is a draft for the new standards. Definitely not pleased with. There's a lot of terminology that states to be included, but not limited to. I don't think there was enough specifics of what they would be teaching. And I do think that we will be addressing that later on with the House Ed Committee. The chairman, as I alluded to earlier, that was sort of a disrupt for our committee. And actually, education was my most sane committee that I thought that we were there for children in our future. So that became a little bit troubling of, certainly there cannot be politics in education. And that's with my previous service on a school board, that was the reason that I remember, telling people should not be politics in, setting a future for our students in the next generation. So that was, a challenge, and we have yet to see how we will move forward with leadership in that particular committee. With everything else going on of trying to work closely with the Bessie board and the Department of Ed, I would like to, again, just take this opportunity to say we have a new superintendent, and I do plan on communicating with him more. I'm not necessarily pleased with where we are, even these last a year and a half or two. Looking to really put teachers first with the pandemic and where we are with education now. We know that there are educators that are retiring, resigning, finding other jobs. They have been less appreciated in the past. And I still don't know if our education will know how valuable our teachers are and educators, and we don't want to lose them. This is definitely a time for retainment and appreciation. So with that being said, I would be looking to bring one of my bills back where it relates to, teachers going to administrative positions, not just on an appointment by their local superintendent, but having that recommendation brought forth by the board for a recommendation. There's been a lot of concern about everyone not feeling that there's a fair opportunity if it's not in a manner of just a recommendation brought forth. Real quickly on the Labor Committee, as we talk about minimum wage, discrimination in the workplace, I think there's a lot of work to be done. It was very, 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 very disappointing where we could not even approve a study to be done on minimum wage, much less a minimum wage increase. I think that was like my last straw. We know that we are at the bottom in every area as it relates to our state, and for our colleagues not to even want to hear, why and what we could do to increase it, I think was the biggest defeat for me this session, as well as just discrimination as we talk about in the workplace, even with African-American hair, with the information brought forth by workforce attorneys, still was not well received. We had an article, and I would like to end with that. There was an article yesterday in CNN, and it talked about the crime rate in Louisiana as the three top cities, of course, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport, and they mentioned all in Louisiana. But of course, we're one or the most state of poverty. Poverty concerning with education, jobs, and the things that we're just speaking about. It's just time to move forward and address those things so we can not be at the bottom continuously. And with that said, we have a lot of work to do with our other colleagues being honest about, are we really here to make it better for the citizens of Louisiana, the entire Louisiana, or just for you and yours in your district, maybe. I'll stop before I get carried away.
It's okay. We get carried away around here. Thank you so much, Representative Phelps. We know that one of the biggest challenges that we had facing healthy families in the last year and 6 months has been the COVID pandemic. It has exposed many of the inequities that many of us have been talking about for years and trying to bring to the attention of policymakers. But it is glaring now, and I believe that everything happens for a reason. So I'd like to turn to Ms. Alma Stewart Allen with the Louisiana the Louisiana Center for Health Equity, to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've had over the last year and a half.
Thank you so much, Alfreda, and it's a privilege to be here to speak with all of you and to follow behind Senator Barrow and Representative Phelps, who have already kind of set the stage for I think much of the conversation to come, and certainly my comments. I can speak to many of the issues that they've already raised, but I want to start off, I guess, kind of on a positive note and maybe end on a positive note. I just want to say that, in spite of everything, and there is a lot going on in our state with the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the recent Hurricane Ida and the tragedy and devastation left behind with that people are still struggling from. There are a few bright spots. We are making some progress, albeit very slowly. I will point to some legislation that actually Senator Barrow passed, and she can elaborate on it later. But she was successful in getting a bill passed to make health equity a priority for the health department, the Louisiana Department of Health. And also in that legislation, she was able to get them to be required to do an assessment that would look at the need and how we could go about establishing the Louisiana Office on Women's Health. So that was positive. There was also some legislation that was passed that addressed that created a task force to look at family medical leave. And I think that that's positive. I would love to have seen actual policy instead of just a task force to look at it. But that's a step in the right direction. At least we're having the conversations. And also legislation that focuses on the long-term care programs, funding for specifically for home and community-based services and waiver services for people with disabilities. There was legislation passed to urge the department to allocate funding more equitably to those types of programs. As you all know, Louisiana traditionally is a very institutional-minded state. We traditionally have a mindset of putting people in institutions and sometimes leaving them there, and funding those types of facilities disproportionately to what we fund other alternatives to people being outside of being able to be maintained outside of those institutional settings. And so we know that's true in long-term care with the nursing homes and with the home and community-based services. That's been a decades-long battle to have more balance there. As you all know, the Department of Justice has been involved in Louisiana, and there's an agreement to move people from nursing homes who shouldn't be in nursing homes and who could be living in community settings. There's been slow progress with that. And part of it is because of the level of funding. So hopefully that legislation, if implemented, if additional funding is allocated and dedicated to home and community-based services, we can see some more movement in that area. So those are a few positives, and I'll be happy to chime in as we go down the road. But in terms of on the not so bright side, we experienced a lot of what Senator Barrow mentioned this year with the lack of decorum and what I would call I was very concerned about the way procedurally the people's business was conducted in the legislature this year, based upon my own experiences and my own observations being there and observing and trying to be a good citizen and a good advocate and do my work. And so I'll talk a little bit about two bills. Actually, we had two pieces of legislation. If you looked on the legislature's website, that would have created the Louisiana Office on Women's Health, which is a priority for my organization and for many of the organizations that have joined forces with us through the campaign to establish Louisiana Office on Women's Health. And there are well over 50 of those organizations. We had two bills that would have established it. If you look on the Louisiana legislative website, you'll see both pending at the Senate Finance Committee. That's where they both ended. One, Senator Carter's bill, because he got elected and moved on to Congress. Representative Denise Marcel, her legislation, which was HB 193, simply did not get a hearing in that committee, what seems like at the sole discretion of the chair of the committee. And so we are still trying to get some answers as to why the chair, Senator Bodie White, refused to schedule the bill. He actually did schedule the bill. However, he canceled the meeting where it was scheduled and scheduled it for the subsequent hearing and then pulled it off the schedule for that hearing. We've been trying to meet with him. We have been unable to get that meeting schedule. We've been put off and put off and put off. We have sent a formal communication to the senator because it is of great concern that one man has the power to, in essence, stop policy from being made in Louisiana, in the Louisiana legislature. So we're not through with working for that. I definitely know I don't have time to go into all the reasons why we need it. I think that Senator Barrow and Representative Phelps have talked enough about why we need it. One is we're at the bottom for everything. We're 50th. And so I know I need to wrap it up. So that's the where we are with the Office on Women's Health, and I'll be happy to add more later.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stewart Allen. This is any one of these subjects could be a complete webinar. And so we do appreciate the brevity and the understanding of the time limitations that we have. So I want to now go to Ms. Morgan Lemandre, who is the legal director of the Sexual Trauma Awareness Response Program. Just a couple of housekeeping matters. I would like to let our participants know that they can ask any questions that they may have. We ask that you would put those in the Q&A, and we will ask those questions to our panel at the end of the discussion. Senator Barrow and Senator Phelps will have to leave us a little bit early because of a prior commitment, but we will ask you to put any questions for them first. If you are a lawyer and you would like to receive continuing legal education credit, we ask that you put your name and your bar number in the chat. You can put it to just those of us who are panelists so that we maintain your confidentiality, and the same for persons who are seeking CEUs for for your social worker credit. You can put it again, as I said, in the chat to those of us who are panelists so that we maintain your confidentiality. Ms. Lamandre, welcome
Yes.
to welcome home to Southern University Law
Welcome
Center.
home. Yes, I am a proud graduate of SULC. And I think, you know, a big thing about being a graduate from SULC is that when you're there, we talk often about seriousness of purpose. And that is definitely how I left school. And, you know, it really was what prompted me to start a legal program at STAR so we could provide free legal services to sexual assault survivors. And, you know, the last couple of years, we've been really heavily involved in getting legislation passed for sexual assault survivors. And I would say one of my proudest things was in 2015 when, sorry for all the law students who were having to, you know, all of a sudden learn new criminal codes, but we were able to get the criminal definitions, or the way rape was classified, from like aggravated, forcible, and simple. We were able to get that changed to first degree, second degree, and third degree. And that was, you know, something that happened quite a while ago, but that I was really proud of. But I'd say this year, you know, STAR is obviously committed first and foremost to supporting survivors of sexual assault. But in order to really move beyond that point and really to commit to our vision of building a community free from oppression and sexual trauma, we really went beyond and we're lending support to other people who had bills that wouldn't normally think that people who were advocates for sexual assault survivors at the table. So for instance, the Crown Act, we supported the effort to get that passed. That's something that, you know, did not get passed. So we were hoping that that does eventually make its way through the process. But some of the other things, some of the successes we did have were getting a bill passed that allowed for early lease termination if somebody is sexually assaulted. And so that was one of the things that I think we really had a positive outcome. We also were able to eliminate the prescriptive period for civil claims for child sexual abuse survivors. And the other big thing that really, it was really a beautiful moment where you saw everyone come together. It was heavily supported in a bipartisan manner. They created a look back window. So if a claim had previously prescribed, sexual assault survivors who, you know, were minors when basically they were robbed of their innocence, they could have 3 years to go back and try to file a claim. So it's a way for people to get justice that once thought they were no longer going to have justice. I want to echo some of the things that, some of the other speakers had said about the way procedural issues were handled and sort of decorum. STAR does a scorecard. We didn't do one last year because of COVID, but we did one the previous 2 years. And I'd say that typically we score a vote on final passage. But one of the things we did differently this year is to score people on these procedural issues where they started to play political games. And so what I mean by that is, the bill that I talked about, House Bill 492, that eliminated the prescriptive period, overwhelming bipartisan support on final passage. But on the last day of the legislature, there was a vote in the House, and it was, you need to vote just to hear a bill on the day that you get a conference committee report. So it was a procedural motion to be able to even hear the bill. But ultimately, if that vote failed, then they wouldn't be able to pass that bill. Well, there was an objection to hearing that bill. And, it was unfortunate because I even reached out to my own representative about that and said, I don't understand. You supported the bill. Why would you vote against that? And he said that it was about sending political messages to the Democrats. And so for us, we decided that because that was the game that they were playing, we were going to score that vote to really show the public how our legislators are not doing the people's work and how they're playing games. So you'll see things like that that are a little bit different. I want to, say thank you to Representative Phelps and Senator Barrow. Of course, they're one of our stars on our scorecard, having scored, very high up. We are awarding 2 legislative champions this year. Obviously, we have a lot of champions, but we just, because of the nature of certain bills, we have one of the champions is Representative Amy Freeman. The other is Jason Hughes for their work. Some of their other bills that, we were able to have successes on is getting, removing the ability or the requirement that survivors had to get a petition for protection order notarized and instead doing a written affirmation. And, there's still a lot of work to do. And it's funny because Senator Barrow, she messaged me on Twitter about something because I was ranting about how this issue where survivors are still having barriers. So we pass a law and then people aren't following the law, and there's no consequences when people do not essentially follow the law. And so there's still lots of work to do. I was very happy to see my Chancellor Pierre, testify in support of a bill that would prohibit pre-employment arbitration requirements, and that bill also did not pass. So there's still a lot of work to do. I'm so happy that we're able to have these conversations in forums like this so we can make sure people are also there, because there are advocates at the table, but really our legislators pressure needs to be put on them, and they need to know we're watching and that we will hold them accountable when it comes time for elections if they don't vote what is the best interest for the people of Louisiana. So thank you, and thank you for having this forum.
Thank you so much. And she had 12 seconds to go, y'all. Thank you. Let's see. Let me remind everybody, lawyers, if you are seeking continuing legal education units for our social workers, you can put your name in the chat to us as panelists and your bar number or your identifying information so that we can get you credit. I want to now welcome Ms. Angelle Bradford, who is a tireless advocate. She does so many different things, but I'm going to just highlight her leadership in Moms Demand Action for gun sense in America. And she can tell you other things that she would like you to know about her and tell you about her experiences at the legislature during the 2021 session. Welcome, Ms. Bradford.
All right, thank you so much. Can you hear me all right? Okay, this is the first time I've used my Samsung tab because my laptop went out on me before this. So my name is Angelle, and I am the chapter leader for Moms Demand Action. We have a lot of partners, and I'm sure I often get confused with my twin sister, Caitlin, who works for Power Coalition, and So we end up in a lot of different spaces, but my chief volunteer leadership roles are with Moms Demand Action and then with Sierra Club, the Delta chapter here in Louisiana. And for Moms Demand Action, we are the largest gun violence prevention organization in the country. And then, of course, Louisiana has their own chapter. And we have groups mostly across South Louisiana. We're trying to expand, but not there yet. This legislative session was probably the wildest I've ever experienced, quite frankly, both with any with any of the organizations I'm with and just in general as a citizen. Super hard to follow. And of course, we had a wild year of bills as it pertained to gun violence, either proliferation or prevention. And one of those bills, or three in this case, there were 3 or 4 permitless carry bills. And just, for clarification, permitless carry is what we call it. Folks that are proponents of it would call it constitutional carry, which is not a thing. But essentially, it allows for carrying a weapon, concealed carry, without a permit or a background check. And why that's so crucial in a state like Louisiana, we already have unlicensed sellers, which includes mostly like online sellers. And so a lot of folks don't go through a background check. And so without a concealed carry permit, that means some folks will never have a background check. And other than permitless carry, which we fought back on both throughout legislative session and then through the veto session, and thank God John Bell Edwards was able to hold his veto of those bills, or that bill, because only one ultimately made it to his desk. We also fought against nullification, which was essentially saying that federal laws as it pertains to guns and new ones, because they changed the language, that federal laws wouldn't apply in Louisiana, which was just crazy because, of course, we're a part of the United States of America, and therefore we have to follow the laws of the country. But that, it was a wild year, and a lot of the bills that we support, like universal background checks or background checks on every cell, essentially, didn't make it very far. And so we have a while to go to really continue to build power so that our legislators are fully understanding of the fact that we want a safer Louisiana. We don't want to have to come to the legislature every year just to fight back on something. In addition to that, so I will highlight that on the environmental side of things, as it pertains to the legislature, the Sierra Club side of things, the majority of our energy was spent just trying to connect the dots that privatization of our public services and public goods and public parks is a serious priority for folks that are undermining our democracy. And so we spent most of our time pushing back on, so for folks that are familiar with the concept of a just transition, so moving away from investment in oil and gas and giving more opportunities and jobs to our communities here in Louisiana, there's a real push to continue to force the same type of bad behavior, but in industries that are still run by the Exxons of the world, the oil and gas industry, and just transitioning that energy to what's called carbon capture sequestration, which is a whole nother webinar. But essentially, we don't want those dangerous processes ending up in Black and brown BIPOC neighborhoods. And so most of our energy is just, protecting public good and then pushing back on carbon capture. And then trying to promote the concept of a future that centers our climate and then centers workers, and advancing things like public transportation being ubiquitous across the state of Louisiana. And so I'll end with that because I don't want to go much further, but I can answer questions about either.
Wow, y'all are doing real good at the end. Are y'all getting tired? I don't know. But thank you so much, Angelle. We really appreciate you and all of the work that you do to make our Louisiana a better place to live. And so now I want to welcome in Ms. RuthAnne Oakey-Forest, who is the Policy Director for Louisiana Policy Institute for Children. Welcome, Ms. Frost. Ms. Oakey-Forest.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to talk briefly about the Policy Institute and what we do. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that seeks to influence public policy surrounding children birth to age 4 through sound data and research. We're really focused on this age group because brain science tells us that 90% of a brain's connections are made by the age of 5. So these are really crucial years for children that set them up for future success. We are primarily focused on high quality early care and education, although we do look at the other things that children need to succeed. And right now in Louisiana, only 30% of in-need children birth to 3 are able to access a high quality early care and education program. And at the same time, only 40% of kindergartners entered school this past year on benchmark, which means our kindergarten teachers are playing catch up and remediation with more than half of the students in their class. So we think early care and education is the building block to future success. And then those numbers get even worse if you break it down by infants and toddlers. Only 15% of in-need infants and toddlers are able to access high quality early care and education. And obviously those spots are the most difficult to get, and they're the most expensive for parents to pay for. So it's a huge problem in terms of like helping children succeed. But then there's also an economic and workforce development case, because obviously if parents aren't able to send their child to a safe, quality environment that they can afford and access and then works for their hours, then their ability to participate fully in the workforce is pretty limited. So our big issue this last session was to try to increase funding for early care and education. In 2019, the Early Care and Education Commission found that if we want to close the gap for the children birth to 3 that need access to these programs but don't have them, the state would need to invest $86 million ongoing, and then subsequent investments of $80 million a year for 10 years. So a pretty significant amount of money, obviously. Currently, the state is spending less than 0.5% of its state budget on these issues. So we focused primarily on new sources of revenue generation, because obviously there's like a lot of really crucial programs in the state. And just because we view this issue as particularly relevant and with a huge return on investment, a Nobel Prize winning economist found that, you can get up to $7 to $12 return on investment for every dollar you invest in early care and education. Obviously cutting some other area to get that money is not ideal. So we focus on sports betting and persuading legislators to committing some of that revenue to what's called the Louisiana Early Childhood Education Fund, which is a state fund that was created a few years ago that offers local entities a dollar for dollar state match on their investments. So New Orleans just put $3 million into their city budget for this. Shreveport fundraised through philanthropic sources and businesses $1 million. Jefferson Parish also put in $250,000 in their parish budget. And all these local entities are supposed to be able to go to this fund and get a dollar for dollar match on their investments. Well, right now, even though there are various sources for that fund, it's not sufficiently funded to actually make those matches yet. So sports betting, which was just legalized, was a really good opportunity to get that money in that fund and try to incentivize more local governments to buy into early care and education and to make those crucial investments. We were successful at getting 25% of those revenues capped at $20 million, which is really great. Although we're not going to hit that $20 million cap for some time. Like the initial projections for sports betting are putting it around $6 million a year. But that said, we're very excited about that development, and we're very hopeful that it can lead to more investment in the future. But there's actually like a lot of room still in this area for improvement, but we are encouraged by this particular issue. And one thing I just would say generally, it's really interesting that pretty much all policymakers we talk to agree that early care and education is a crucial issue, and the issue is always just how do we actually prioritize funding for it, because where you spend your money shows where your priorities like truly are. So we are very hopeful that young children and their working parents will continue to be more prioritized in the future.
Thank you so much, Ms. Oakey-Forest. Peter, this is all your fault. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you and what you shared with us here today. So we have last, but certainly not least, Ms. Latanya Howard, who is with StepUp Louisiana. I've had the pleasure of meeting both Ben and Maria And our own Taryn Branson is one of your directors. And so we're very excited to have you with us, Ms. Howard. And so tell us about your experience and that of the StepUp Louisiana at the legislative session this year.
Good evening. My name is Latanya Howard. I am a member of StepUp Louisiana, and I've been working with them during the past year and a half with our Unemployed Workers Committee. I am a 23-year employee of the Ernest Morial Convention Center here in New Orleans, who found myself unemployed due to no fault of my own, but due to COVID. And I've been working for the last year and a half with StepUp and working through our legislative on different fights that we've been having. I worked on our campaign for the Fight for 15 to increase our city employee workers to receiving $15 an hour for their work. And also with our unemployed workers, I had the privilege of speaking before the Legislative Council to try to raise our unemployment, because our unemployment is the second lowest in the country right now. We did get a bill passed, thankfully, from Representative Rodney Lyons, who helped to raise our minimum, our maximum to additional $28 more each week. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous speaking. But also I've been working just to help with our workers' rights. To a lot of people in the state of Louisiana didn't know how to go about receiving their unemployment or other options that they had that was made available to them out there. So we were able, through our organization, to set them up with people to just basically help them to receive their benefits and things, because we had a lot of hiccups and problems with our unemployment, where some people were put on hold for as much as 2 hours or more to be disconnected and then have to start the process all over again, or hadn't received any funding for weeks or months at a time. So we were able to work through some of those headaches and issues that a lot of people found themselves in, myself including. I had went for almost 2 months before I received a check from unemployment, and was able to finally be able to get connected with someone who was able to help me with that.
Okay, thank you so much. We do have, and I'm glad that we've been able to kind of abbreviate things a bit. We do have a question in the chat that I think is really important for both Senator Barrow and Representative Phelps to be able to respond to. And that question, Senator, is why wasn't the federal government's unemployment insurance benefits reinstated after the Delta variant cases rose?
So I'm gonna try to give you the best answer I possibly can. So during the process, there was, and maybe Representative Phelps can add a little bit more insight to this as well, but there was a lot of discussion about trying to increase the rates. So part of, quote unquote, I guess the negotiations was that they would increase the rates by $28 per week in exchange for ending the program a little earlier. And that was a vote that the legislators voted on. I voted against that measure, and and you can go back and look at how all the legislators voted on that particular agreement. But part of, and this goes back to having to work with our colleagues and working through the process. I can't remember the other senator that brought a bill to try to increase it, but it was tied to actually decreasing the number of weeks that you can actually qualify for unemployment. And so this was not something that the governor did. This was something that the legislature actually done. And you can go back and see how every member voted. and it was an exchange. So the exchange was, we will increase the amount, $28 per week, for actually cutting it off a little earlier, and it was not reinstated. The federal government, had the cutoff date in September, and so we definitely couldn't go beyond that, but we ended it, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks earlier than the program would have ended already. So that was part of the negotiation too. You can go back and see how everybody voted. I voted no.
So just for clarity, we ended ours July 31st here in Louisiana, and it ended nationally on September 6th. Thank you, Senator Barrow. Representative Phelps, would you like to address that issue?
Yes. Again, I like to just agree with Senator Barrow, that was definitely a negotiation tool. At the last hour, if I remember correctly, Senator Barrow, that was sort of
Correct.
the end of the session. Because it was so political, the tone and the sentiment around the Capitol was people were not going back to work because of just living on unemployment. And that was such an argument that I remember having, saying, you don't know what a person's situation is. They could have opted not to go back to that particular employer. They could have gone back to school. There were a number of things. They could have had enough to make by, just the situations. You don't know, what was going on in a person's life, instead of trying to put everybody in a box. And, but if it took that, and we really did support Representative Lyons' effort of just $28. But at the end of the day, if that's what we had to make a trade with and try to encourage people to go back to work or get an education, I voted for it, just for the opportunity there to actually to take the compromise.
So we have a live question from one of our supporters, one of our partners here, Peter Robbins Brown. Peter.
Well, I just wanted to throw out to the folks involved in this issue is, this was like you said, a big narrative, especially coming from the business lobby, that if we, cut these off, people were going to rush back to work. But, we haven't seen that. We've seen the same level of unemployment. It really didn't make any difference in terms of levels of employment. And so I guess I'm just curious, is there a way, or how do we hold the folks accountable who sort of, put that narrative out there that turned out to be completely wrong? It was never based on any evidence. Is there a way to sort of hold those folks accountable, or to be able to say, hey, you were just wrong about this. So if you were so wrong about this, why should we necessarily listen to you on other things?
Well, I will say to you, I think we definitely need to have the conversation, because they have been absolutely wrong. And I kept saying it in many of the committee hearings that, I asked the secretary to actually do a survey to ask people, what were some of their issues, because we could not just I thought it was very wrong to make those type of observations and then make those comments to insinuate that people was just kind of taking advantage. And that was kind of like the attitude that some of my colleagues had, and just not going back to work. There were a lot of issues. People had healthcare issues that they were concerned about. A lot of folks were afraid about COVID. People decided to go back and get their education and go into a different arena, a different field. And so for those individuals who were saying that, I think that we definitely need to have the conversation with them and call them on what they assume to be truth. Because like you say, right now, today, we have not seen this whole huge uptick of people yet going back to work in certain areas. People are really choosing, and a lot of people started their own businesses as a result of this. This actually gave people an opportunity to look at things that they have been desiring to do, to go into their own business. So, for some people to assume, A, people didn't want to work, it's not true. And then B, people to use this opportunity to actually to do better for themselves, to go into a better arena for themselves, and to actually better themselves educationally. But so, yes, we should.
Senator Barrow, I really appreciate you, and I appreciate everything that you did to bring to light what that discussion was during the session. But it was so interesting to me that they wanted to force people to come back to work at slave labor rates.
That's right.
Right? But they had absolutely no challenge, no problem at all with accepting and insisting that the dollars that had come in from the federal government would be used to offset their obligation to pay into the trust fund. That's absurd. And we need to start calling these people out on that. They always want to shame poor people and punish poor people when we, because I'm not that far removed, when we come to ask those people who are responsible for our safety and health to be responsible for our safety and health, but they have no problem at all when they are themselves benefiting from monies that were sent into this state by the federal government to benefit people who could not work because of their own issues with their safety and health, their child care issues, and all of those things that the government was taking into account when they sent those dollars to Louisiana. The way that we hold those people accountable, this is Alfreda Tillman Bester, and I am not speaking for Southern University Law Center at this point. You vote them out. Okay.
Let me, you have really.
And I have a comment too.
I'm just saying, this is the issue that's very close and dear to me. And this is one that is very frustrating. And being that we're coming to the end where I know that myself and Representative Phelps have the same meeting that we have to attend, going forward, for me, for the next legislative session. So this was a fiscal session and we can only introduce 5 bills and it was fiscal and matter. Next session is going to be a general session and we'll be limited to the number of fiscal bills that we can actually present. But what I am very closely watching is the money, because we keep looking for different results, but we're not willing to invest the money that it takes. And I say I mean the state, because I learned this from Representative Dr. Flournoy many years ago when she made this comment. She said, show me your checkbook and you will show me your priorities. And so when I look at the state of Louisiana and the amount of money that we give to big companies in the billions of dollars, which, look, at the end of the day, I have no problem with investment, right? But it has to be fair and equitable. I need to make sure that we're doing the same thing as it relates to our people. And we're expecting different results, but not putting the money in. Early childhood education is one of the things I heard you talk about, Ms. Frost. We have to put the money there. Healthcare, Ms. Stewart, Allen, we have to put the money there. And we have to invest in those things that we keep seeing ourselves at the bottom of the list of. And we can do that. Louisiana can do that. But let me tell you what I have been watching, and I'm a native of Mississippi, so I can say this. I was born in Woodville, Mississippi. My parents moved to Louisiana when I was 5. So I find myself really being between the two, Mississippi, Louisianian. But Mississippi is beginning to outpace us because they're making the investments early on. And we have to do the same thing if we want to see things differently. We can't expect different results doing the same thing. That's the definition of insanity. And I can go into a whole different conversation about the individuals we're going back to work, because I believe that is a conversation that we need to have, Peter, with those individuals who made those insinuations about our citizens, who at the end of the day want the same thing that we all want on this phone call and the same thing that my legislative colleagues want. They want to be able to have a decent life where they can live with dignity and take care of their families.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Representative Phelps.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to piggyback on that just a little bit. One other thought that we had, well, it was just real easy for me to keep reminding my colleagues that, excuse the noise, that citizens were only receiving benefits that they had paid into, that you could not literally receive and live off of, quote unquote, unemployment if you had not earned it and paid into your own account. So for some reason, they thought this was just free money for people. That was the way they were speaking and forgetting how one earns unemployment benefits. That was a constant reminder. And I would like to take the opportunity to say to Peter, to Louisiana Progress, and the STAR staff, and all of you, the partners, that, because we definitely need you, but definitely to Louisiana Progress, that stood with us and was always the voice of reason for people. And hearing that from the audience, it caused pause for some of our colleagues on the other side at that moment. May not have lasted long, but again, they do hear us. And thank you all for this opportunity today. And we will be revisiting.
Thank you so much, Senator and Representative. I know you have to go, but there's one other question that I really want to get to you before you go. And I just take you a moment, if you will. This one is from Melissa Flournoy, who is the chair of the board of directors for Louisiana Progress. And her question was, what are some of the lessons that we've learned during this session about how to talk about the issues that will improve the quality of life for children and families, and how we frame issues so that we can have productive discussions?
I think we can start with diversity training. I don't know how that's going to go, but that is a conversation that we've had among some of our the representatives at least. But we need some diversity training to understand that we have across the state of Louisiana, there are different cultures and there are different situations, economic situations in neighborhoods and communities. And for those who do not perhaps represent everyone of that statute, they need to have the information that it takes to represent them. And I think that's going to be very important in redistricting. Candid conversations. I hope even Senator Barrow, I had this thought, but maybe we can even start with our women caucus of just being honest about the diversity that, the populations that we serve, and not judgmental because of the status and the situations of the state of Louisiana. What do we do to improve it instead of talking about it and shunning and looking down on certain communities and taking that so far as to the chamber floor when we're making votes? We definitely have to have very candid. And I don't mind. I'm some of you, I don't know if you follow me, but I don't mind speaking the truth. And I'm just open for my colleagues to receive it and be honest about, the fact that we need to move Louisiana forward is not political, and it definitely should not be biased and personal.
Okay. Senator?
I would agree with Representative Phelps, and I certainly am very happy to have her at the legislature, because certainly she brings great value to the House of Representatives and to the body. As you asked that question, Dr. Flournoy, I want to be positive, and I believe that there will be some level of positivity that I can offer. But I can tell you, after being there for 16 years, sometimes it's very disheartening to see where individuals have just drawn the line in the sand and they're not open to wanting to really have the conversation. I don't know how many of my colleagues will actually attend diversity training. To be honest with you, the ones that are open and you can have
You're right.
That you can have a conversation with, they will come, but the ones that need to have it probably will not show up. But what I will say, and what I have gained hope in, is building relationships with people. And so I always try to understand where a person is coming from, so then I can understand that perspective. And that was a program that I went through with the Baton Rouge leadership. And I can't think of the name of that program, but it was for me, one of the most transformative experiences I've ever had. And maybe that may help to some degree that I went through with the Chamber of Commerce, where
Leadership Greater Baton Rouge.
Yes. And I don't know if you remember that exercise that you went through, where when you put it to different
social
economic situations, and I was in the class where actually we had the money, but I didn't know we had money, and I was holding on to things because I didn't want to lose anything. And so that for me was one of the most transformative experiences I've ever had. And maybe something of that magnitude may help, but at the end of the day, it really takes the engagement of the public. And this is what I want you to know in terms of how you make a difference, our advocates and the people that we represent showing up and sharing their voice and letting their voices be heard, because at the end of the day, they know that these individuals will be voting for them. I don't vote for them, but you do vote for them. You vote for me. That makes a difference. And I always say, get to know who your legislators are before session begins. So before the session starts, make sure that they know who you are. You know who they are, but make sure they know who you are. Introduce yourself. Introduce yourself now while we are in the interim. Share with them what your concerns are so that when you reach out to them, they know who you are. And that to me is the one thing that have turned some of the people that have been, I would call hardliners, that have turned them a little bit in terms of their position, because at the end of the day, they know that they are going to have to answer to these people who have reached out to them.
Thank you so much, Senator. Ms. Stewart Allen.
We have to go. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. I love y'all. So glad to be a part of such an esteemed group of people.
You know we'll call on you again.
Yes,
I will.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Ms. Stewart Allen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to add a few more comments before we get to the end. I want to echo the fact that it is very, very important that all of us, especially as women, that we engage in the civic engagement activities, and that we are voting, and that we are educating other voters, and that we are encouraging and mobilizing them to vote as well. As I look around on this panel, I see women, 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 women. I see one guy. And, we are the majority of the population here in Louisiana, as well as the majority voters. And so it's a mystical to me as to why we as women cannot mobilize the vote to get policy that is favorable to the well-being of women. And so that speaks volumes to me. I also wanted to say that as far as what I see as some of the major barriers for us in Louisiana, it boils down to the political landscape of this state and the way we do business. And I'm gonna just say that we need to, as citizens, start demanding transparency and accountability. It is inherent upon all of us to start holding our elected officials and our public officials accountable for their actions, and letting them know by our vote when we disapprove. I don't understand how some of these elected officials get voted in year after year after year based upon their record. If you look at their voting record, even in their own district, the districts that they represent and how they vote, they should not be sitting in office at all representing those districts or those constituents. And so the public needs to be more informed, more engaged, and involved in the electoral process. I also want to say, going back to, you asked me about COVID at the beginning, and I didn't address it directly, but I do sit on, we haven't had regular meetings recently, the COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force. There were a plethora of recommendations that were submitted to the governor's office from the task force. I do believe, and I would go on record as saying more can be done. A lot more can be done. Many of those recommendations are just sitting there, and those recommendations could be acted upon, and they need to be acted upon, because yes, COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on this state, especially on communities of color and in rural areas. And so we know that there's a need for us to address some of the needs, and I'm going to speak to one, meaning mental health. And on top of the COVID pandemic, we just had the hurricane, and there are people whose mental health they are in a desperate situation, and we need to be addressing it. After Hurricane Katrina, the state set up a whole system, a whole program called Louisiana Spirit. I don't know if any of you were around back then, just to address the mental health needs of people. We're at that point again where we should be using some of those federal dollars, CARES Act dollars, to provide more immediate, direct mental health services for people.
So there's that passion I told y'all about. So
some people think it's anger. It's not anger. It is passion.
It's passion. I recognize it because I have it myself. So Alma, you got 1 minute, and then I got to go to the other panelists. Okay.
One more thing I want to speak to about the healthcare situation with regards to healthcare specifically. And that is across the board, I believe, as it relates to the disparities that we see, continuing disparities that we see, and some of the practices that are failures, violations of the standards of care. I believe that we need to have more standards of care, more aggressive standards of care to address a lot of the issues that we are seeing pop up that seemingly, fall between the cracks in terms of responsibility to address and properly take the corrective actions to prevent and to take corrective action against.
Thank you so much, Ms. Alma Stewart Allen. I'm going to go to Ms. Lemandre now. Ms. Lemandre.
Yes, I was going to say, one of the things I see at the Capitol often is sort of a lack of empathy in terms of really identifying with the issues that the people of Louisiana have. But one of the things that I do see is when you have the ability to make those personal relationships, like Senator Barrow said, and really make connections to legislators, and even if they don't know what the issue is because they've never experienced it, I've come to realize there is this ability to put things in a perspective where they can identify with. And one of the things that Representative Phelps, she had to leave, which one of her bills, it didn't make it all the way through the process, but the one where essentially getting a flag on your license if there was like a small delay in paying your insurance for a month would automatically result in a pretty hefty fine. And it was interesting to see that happen on the House of Representatives floor, because immediately she got question after question from a legislator who was like, oh, this is all about lack of personal responsibility, lack of doing what you need to do. And then all of a sudden things started to shift when another legislator who was in the same party as the other person was like, this actually happened to me once, and it wasn't because I was purposely not paying my bill. It's just life happens. The bill got lost under my desk, and I tried to clean up a little before this presentation, but even my own desk, things get lost on it, and it's just, we're all human. And he said, this has happened to me, and I think this is a good bill because it just, we're humans and things happen. And I think that when we have that ability to really bring to legislators maybe a situation in which it may not have affected them directly, but either it has affected a family member, and put it into a perspective that even they can understand, that really helps us to get things done. But that does take a lot of energy, time, work. And so we can't just live in this binary where there are good or bad legislators. We have to understand that we do need to put in the time to educate them and make them come to the table and realize that, there are some bad legislators, right? There are some that are never going to give you the time of day because you don't bring them what they want. But for the most part, they are not inherently evil, and we just need to really reach out to them in a very human way. So that's just what I wanted to add.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lamandre. And now Ms. Oakey-Forest has her hand up, and we're going to go to her.
Just briefly, I just wanted to echo what everyone else had said. And also, one thing I think that our organization has done is if you have an issue that you feel really passionate about and you're not really feeling like the message that you're getting out there is like resonating with people, to try to think of it in a different way. So our organization put together an economic study on childcare breakdowns in 2017. It was called Losing Ground. It was the first state study on how much money states lose in terms of tax revenue, in terms of economic growth, in terms of everything else, just due to childcare breakdowns. And it put the loss at Louisiana at $1.1 billion. And
Wow.
we updated that with the Blanco Center just this year, and now it's $1.3 billion. Our businesses lose over $700 million every single year just because parents don't have access to consistent quality early care and education for their children. So, you can make your education argument, you can make your child development argument, and now you can make your business, like workforce development argument and your economic argument, and just try it from like every angle that you can think of. And then finally, I would just add just being tenacious and consistent, because eventually, I think little by little you do chip away at these issues and move things in the right direction. Before I came to the Policy Institute, I worked for the Utah legislature for 8 sessions, and that's how I saw advocates get things done. They would just take a little bite of the apple every year and just keep going. And I think that that's how we succeeded with the sports betting piece this year, because, when we first started those conversations, there were legislators who didn't want us to have any of the sports betting money. You know what I mean? And if you just don't quit, just find that right balance of polite and annoying and just slide in right there and stay there. I think eventually, you see movement, small, but sometimes frustrating, but still movement.
Thank you so much, Ms. Oakey-Forest. If you would share that study with us, we would make sure that all of our participants get it and that they can look at it and be able to use that information. When people do these studies, sometimes they get kind of hidden away, and they really are knowledge that can be used to share with people who may not be listening unless we have something that we can share with them and show them the numbers. So thank you so much. I want to go to Ms. Howard and allow her to give us anything that she didn't have an opportunity to say before. If there's something, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't want to leave without allowing you to say anything else that you would want to add to the conversation.
Okay, I just wanted to piggyback on what Senator Barrow was saying. A lot of the legislators believe that, people didn't want to return back to work because we were sitting home collecting all of this money from unemployment, which was not true. Okay, myself personally, what I was receiving with the federal was basically the same amount I was receiving if I worked every day. Me personally, trying to return back to work was because of health issues. I suffer I have asthma, I have diabetes, I have high blood pressure. It was unsafe for me to return back to work. I work in the field in the hospitality industry where I'm working around people from all across the country. So it wasn't safe for me to return back to work. And to have the federal funding pulled from under me, I was receiving the maximum amount in unemployment, which only $247 a week. After taxes, it was only $222. Nowhere in this country can you live and survive off of, which was less than $1,000 a month.
Thank you so much.
And utilities and stuff was running me $1,500 a month. So my internet going in and out. So to try and survive off of that and pay bills, keep food on the table, because not everyone receives food stamps and assistance. I work, so my income, I was not able to receive those benefits and things.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Howard.
Hear my legislative and my people that I voted in office telling me, oh, I don't want to work. Okay.
Okay.
I'm losing you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Howard. We
Because,
get you. We get your point. Let me
I've
just
been
say,
working since I was 16 years old. I didn't know what it was like not to be working.
okay.
So it was an insult to me.
I don't want to cut you off, but you are going in and out. And I just want to make this one point. Y'all, the conversation, again, attack poor people for being poor, unemployed people for being unemployed. But the conversation never really got around to the reason that people are not returning to work is that the wages are so low that they couldn't survive on what these employers were willing to pay them. So we have to, the first thing they teach us in law school is how to frame the conversation, right? You don't let your opponent frame the argument. You have to come back and let them know that what they're saying is not applicable to the people that you serve. And I just hate this because we're running out of time, but I do also want to allow Ms. Bradford to give us her closing comments as well.
Yeah, I love this discussion too. And I absolutely adore all of you and super grateful for this opportunity. And I was just going to say, so, this legislative session was the first time I feel like I was able to blend my professional worlds with my volunteerism. And I think a lot of folks think that legislative advocacy and outreach to your legislators in general is a hobby or something that's like exclusive to just us. And I don't think folks realize that they are so accessible. Our leaders are accessible, and we need more people. At least for me, my world right now, I'm chiefly focused on gun violence prevention and the climate crisis. And these are two of the most controversial topics in the legislature, and we don't have enough movement in this area. And so I know we need more folks in the movement. And all I can say is I think our legislators get away with what we allow. And Louisianans need to come to a place where we stop allowing the corruption, the injustices, and the oppression of our people, because it's undermining our democracy and getting to a point where we won't have the power to undo it if we have enough judges and legislators that are against us. And so I am super radical today, I guess, but I just think our movement needs a lot more people, and it can't just be us, and we can't just be admired for the advocacy that we do. We need more people on our team.
Thank you so much. And I just want to recognize that Judge Marcus Hunter is here. Judge Hunter, I don't know if you heard me earlier. If you want your CLEs, you can put your name and your bar number in the chat, and we'll make sure that you get your CLEs for this. But I'm always happy to see you. One of the things that he said was that a politician is a rented tool for you to advance your policy agenda, not the other way around. I love him. Okay, so listen, y'all, we are so out of time. We always do this. We always run out, but it's because of the passion that each of you bring. I want to thank the Louisiana Progress and the National Association of Social Workers for partnering with us to bring this webinar to the people of Louisiana. I hope that you all will join us for our third and final webinar in this series, which will happen on October 14th. And that one, we will be talking about redistricting. It is a critical part of our work, and we need everybody's voices to be heard. Not after they've done it, after it's done, but in the process while it's happening. And so now I want to welcome Melissa Flournoy, who is the chair of the board of directors of Louisiana Progress, and she is going to end our session for us today. Thank you so much for all of your support, Melissa. You and Peter and Charlie have just been phenomenal. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a great partnership with Southern Law Center and with the NASW. And thank you to all of our panelists. And I think we accomplished our task today, which is to really talk about the interconnectivity of all of these issues around childcare, healthcare, health issues, equity issues around healthcare, the need for better paying jobs, and to think more holistically about public policy and how it affects the families of Louisiana. I think we touched briefly on sort of the underlying narrative, which is we really do have challenges around systemic racism in public policy in Louisiana. And we have to find ways to continue to address those issues in a way people can hear them. And so the big challenge continues to be, how do we bring people together to focus on solving problems and put the people first? And how do we lead with the people? And so we will have a lot of federal money coming in because of the Recovery Act, because of the Infrastructure Act. I do want to lift up some of the publications of other groups, the Roadmap to Recovery that the Power Coalition has pulled together, outlines a lot of these issues. Louisiana Progress is happy to sign on and help promote that. But redistricting is important. So please join us on October the 14th at noon for the redistricting session, because who votes matters. And we really want to make sure that every vote and voter in Louisiana makes their vote count. Redistricting is essential for sort of reshifting the balance of power moving forward. And so I hope all of you who are here with us today can come back in 2 weeks for the redistricting summit. Progress will have a publication on redistricting. We are encouraging participation in the regional redistricting roadshows. And so there's a lot we can do, but it makes the most difference is when people show up, are knowledgeable, and can have relationships and build personal relationships with their elected officials. And so that's one of our goals, is to give people the tools that they need and the resources to be effective advocates. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, Alfreda and Southern and your staff, and onward. There is work to be done, and we can do more by doing it together. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to our participants and our attendees. We look forward to seeing you on October 14th.